Hello there, it's Graciela here. In today's video, we'll be learning how to use Power Automate to manage item security level. For this, we're going to be using these project lists. And the purpose is that users can come to this list, they are going to create new projects, and depending on the department that the user selects, this is the set of people who will get access. In this case, this user that we have here is an owner, so they're allowed to see everything. But for example, if someone comes and create a finance project, some people will get access if they belong to the finance department, and they will have access to edit. And some other people will have access to the item list, but they will have access to just view the record, so they won't be able to edit. In this case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be assigning permissions based on the department to which the record belongs to. And to achieve this, we are going to be using these two users. We're going to have this owner user, which is my account, and we are also going to use this second user, which is a regular user and a member of the site. This user doesn't have full control, is only a member of the site, and we are going to restrict which records this user can see based on the department. And for this, we can use either SharePoint groups or security groups or Microsoft groups. So in this case, what we have done, we have created 4 security groups, one for finance view only, one for marketing, and one for marketing view only. So in this case, if the project that is created gets assigned to finance, then people that is added to the security group finance, they will get access to both view and edit. And the ones that are part of the finance view only will only get access to view the record and not edit it. And also can work for more than 2 departments. In this case, we're going to be working with just these 2, but this can work dynamically because we're going to create a flow that will dynamically get the department from the SharePoint list, and then it's going to get the security group that belongs to the right permission to both view and edit, or to just view, to make sure that the right people has access to the right items. But just before jumping into Power Automate stuff, let's talk about a little bit about SharePoint concepts. So in this case, I'm going to create a new record, and let's just call it test and assign it to any department because we have nothing in place yet. So you can see that as an owner, I can see this record. And since there's no restriction, if I go to the other user, this user is also going to be able to see this record. But if I right click on as the owner, if I right click on the item and then I click on manage access, I can click on this option that is called stop sharing. So when I stop sharing, no one other than the owners will get access. So you see how from 3 groups and 1 people having access, now we only have 1 group and 1 person. If I go back to my other site, to my other window, you're gonna see that this user no longer has access because this record is no longer shared with the members of the group. But I can directly share this item with the specific user if I click on this section that is called grant access. So I can directly grant access to this user by selecting their name. And then if I click on grant access, this user will be able to see the record, as you can see here. If again, I remove the access from this user, or if I click on manage access and change their access from can edit to view only, and I click on apply, as you can see, as it is right now, I can double click on it and it allows me to make changes. But if I refresh this, you see that now there's an icon here that says that it's read only and I cannot perform any action on this item. That's one way of sharing things, but in our case, it might be, for example, that whoever is part of the marketing department is a set of people today, but we don't know how that's gonna look in 3 months or 6 months. And it's not really doable to be updating these permissions. Let's suppose that we have at least of hundreds or thousands of rows. It's not doable to keep updating and keep giving permissions to each specific person depending on and doing it manually. So in this case, it's better if we create some security groups and we assign the permission to the security group. And that way, anyone who gets assigned to the security group will automatically get access to these records. So in this case, let's stop sharing again. So let's manage access. And let's see how we can dynamically. And if we look, for example, for those security groups that we just created, you can see that they are available here. And I can directly invite this marketing group and then grant access. Even though I didn't directly invite it, or I didn't directly add this specific user to have access, since this user is part of the group marketing, then this user will get automatic access based on the security group this user is part of. So as you can see, this user now has access. So what we are going to be doing is we're going to be using Power Automate to identify what's the department, and then identify what's the security group that is linked to that department, and then automatically and dynamically assign those permissions to the users. So for this, we're going to be creating a Power Automate workflow, but we also need something like an access matrix, like a table or something where we can store the relationship between the departments, the access type, and the security group, because it may be that your company will have, I don't know, like 3 or 4 security groups, or Microsoft groups, or SharePoint groups that can have the word marketing in it. So it may be that we cannot just look for the security group name marketing and there will be an exact match, or that there's the scenario that there may be more than one. So in this case, we recommend creating an access matrix that will help you manage and create a relationship between the departments and between the security groups. So in this case, what we're going to do, we're just going to add a new column, and we already have a departments list. In this case, we only have 2 of them, but we can come here and just create a lookup column against the departments, and then just call it department. And then let's select the department list from here, and we are going to be using the title. That's fine, because there's where we're storing the department name, and then hit on save. Then we are going to need an access type column. In this case, we're going to be using either view or edit. So let's do view and edit, because those are the 2 type of access that we can grant. And then let's hit on save. And finally, we also need a column, which is going to be a text type column that will store the security group ID. So we're going to call it group ID. That's going to be a single line of text. So let's hide this title column, because we're not going to be using it. And then let's edit in grid, and then let's add a new item, and let's start by finance. And then we're going to have a view access, and we're also going to have finance and edit, and we're also going to have marketing, view, and edit. And the only thing now that we have to do is to just go ahead and grab the group ID for each specific department and access type. So in this case, this is the marketing group ID. If I go to properties, let's grab the security group ID and put it here into marketing. And let's copy the object ID for each of these. So finance, this is the one. Then, well, I copied in the wrong column. So this is edit. This is edit, and then finance view only. So let's copy the security group ID here as well. And then marketing view only, which is here. So now we are pretty much ready to start creating our workflow. So for the workflow, we are going to be using this blog that we already have in our website as a base, because here's where we have the code that we can use to set up all these permissions. So in this case, let's just go to a Power Automate tab. And once we are in Power Automate, we can either start a solution, or if we already have a solution that has that is related to what we are building, we can go ahead and add our flow into the solution. So let's do new flow, and then automated cloud flow. And what we are going to be doing is when the item in SharePoint is created, then is when we want this record to be assigned, or to have the department permission assigned. So here, let's just write a name for it, which can be, for example, and then let's click on create. The first thing that we need to do for the members to not see every single record that we have in SharePoint, the first thing that we have to do in the Manage Access section is to stop sharing. So we also need to replicate this in SharePoint. So here I click to stop sharing, and you can see that this user will stop having access because we pretty much removed everything. So what we need to do is a pretty similar thing here as well in Power Automate. And there's an action that we can use that comes out of the box with the SharePoint connector to remove access. But the first thing that we need to do is to select the site address, which in this case it's this one. And then we are going to select the projects list. And then we are going to look for the SharePoint connector. And we're going to see more and then stop sharing. And here it is, stop sharing an item or a file. We're going to save it as favorite. And let's select our SharePoint site again. And let's select the projects table. Here it's going to ask us which is the item that we want to stop sharing. In this case, what we want to stop sharing is just the item that gets created. So we just need to bring the ID from the previous step. We just do that. Then we can save. And now we can test this first step just to make sure it works. So we're going to create a new record. We're just gonna call it test2 or something like that. And once it runs, we're gonna notice how it immediately stops sharing and the user can not see it. So now the flow should be running anytime soon. And okay, it seems like it recognized that we ran this flow because the execution finished. If we have a look at the item number 2 that we created, and if we click on Manage Access, we're going to see that only the owners and my user have access. If we go to this list, we'll see that the members or the regular users won't have access. So the first part is complete. Now it's time to dynamically share the item. There's a specific action as well to share items with users, and it's called grant access to an item or a file. So if we open SharePoint again, and it's this one that we have here. And here we would do something pretty similar, just select what's the SharePoint site, and then selecting the list. And then we can also select the ID, which is pretty similar to what we did so far, just selecting the ID from the trigger. And here in the recipients, this is where we need to remember which type of security group we're using, or which type of access or which type of user we want to grant access to. Because in this recipients list, unfortunately, you can only see actual users that are part of the tenant. So for example, if I search for this user, I will be able to find the user here. But if I search for the security groups that I just created, they won't show up. Because here you would only see users from the tenant and groups, Microsoft groups that have an email assigned. And since these are security groups, they just won't show up in this list. So unfortunately, we cannot use this action to share it with the security groups that we have created. But we still need this action because we still need to create, or we still need to share the item with the user that created the record. Because for example, if I go here and I create the record from the user that is just a member and not an owner, when the flow runs, this user will get all their access removed from them. Because remember that what we are doing is we are clicking on Manage Access and we stop sharing. And once we stop sharing, only the owners would get access. So at the end of the day, we need to assign this permission to both the departments plus the person that created the record. So it's important that we also keep this, but we're going to rename it grant access to creator. So we remember that this is why we are adding this action. So in this case, we are going to just select the creator email. So we're just going to use the created by attribute from the trigger, and we are going to give them access so they can view things and leave edit access only to those that are actually part of the edit access group. So we're going to do that. And in this case, if the creator needs to get view access or edit access, you can just change this to what works best for your scenario. So now that we stop sharing the item with everyone and that the creator has access, now we can start adding the access to the specific groups. So we can see that this flow just ran. So if I go back to the user, You see that since we haven't saved, the user lost access, and that's why it's important to add this action here as well. Okay, now it's time to look into our access matrix. So what we need to do is we need to, in this case, the project that we create, we need to grab what's a department and just get the list of groups that they have access to. So in this case, what we need is just a get items action from SharePoint. So we're going to look get items because we need to extract as many items as are here, because it may be, for example, that more people will need access. So I don't know if there's, for example, a group for the leadership team that needs access to all the departments. We can add a new item here that is related to the finance team, where the leadership team can view everything, and then we just add what's their group ID here. So it may be that we have 2 rows, 3 rows, just one, depending on the type of access. So we don't know that. So we are going to use these get items to get as many items from the access matrix that require access. So we're going to use get items. And again, we're going to select what's the SharePoint list. And then the SharePoint side, now the SharePoint list. And we are going to use the filter query attribute, and actually have as well a blog on how to filter in SharePoint. So in this case, we know that this department is lookup column. So what we can do is we can just find what's the format to create those type of filtering. So let's go to filter lookup columns. And in this case, we can use the ID or we can use the title. I think we can use either or. So in this case, let's just go with the ID. So let's copy this and just put it here. So what we need to do is just put the column name here. In this case, we're calling it department, and we are going to filter by the ID. And what we need to know is that if you renamed this column, you will not be able to use the display name. You always need to use here in this filter, you always need to use the backend column name. If you have doubts about what's the backend column name, or if you don't remember if you renamed something, you can always go to list settings and then just locate a column, open it, and then here in the URL, once you open it, you will see the actual name. So this is what we mean by internal name. It's the name that shows here. If at the beginning you made a typo or something and then you renamed, the backend column will stay as the original name that you assigned. So it's really important to remember that, because the filter will fail if we don't use the actual internal name. So we are going to filter by department to find all the security groups that are related. So let's just go here and paste it, and then this stays as it is. We just leave it with /ID, and instead of this, we are going to pass what's the department ID. So let's look for department, and you can see it shows automatically here. And now we can just find the list of departments. And before testing, I just realized that this get items is not on the right. The filter is not on the right column. We need to apply the filter to the access matrix, not to the projects, because what we need to do is we need to bring the groups IDs for the department in the access matrix table. So we need to click on save. And we are going to test and add a new item. But if we see this workflow, we see that all the steps run properly. What we care about is this get items, where we are retrieving where the department is equal to 1, which means marketing for our case. And then if we see on the raw outputs, we're going to see that we have 2 security groups, which are the ones that, let's search for group ID. So we have 2 security groups IDs in which we are going to share one edit access, and the other one we're going to share view access. So now that we have these here, let's just rename, and let's rename this to get security groups. And then now we can start granting the access. So to grant the access, we need to use the send HTTP SharePoint action. So that's the one that we will need to use. So let's find it. Let's do SharePoint. And first things first, is always going to ask us what's the SharePoint site. Then it's going to ask us what's the method. In our case, we're always going to be using the method post. So let's do post. And then it's going to ask us what's the URI or URI or the URL where we want to send this request. So in this case, we're going to leave this code in the description of the video as well as this link. So you can just copy and paste what we have here. So we're going to copy this line of code and we're going to paste it here. So what we need to replace is the list ID, and we also need to replace the item ID that we want to share. So for the item ID, we did the same thing that we did previously. We just passed the ID of the trigger. So we're just gonna click on that. And to get the list ID, there are many ways in which we could do that. But in this case, what I'm gonna do is I will just go to list settings. And here you will be able to retrieve the ID from this URL. I will just look for a decode URL page and just pass my ID there so it gives me back my ID. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. And then we just need to add the body to our payload. And we are just going to copy the code from this website. You can see that this website has two options. One where we're working with SharePoint groups, and this one is when we're working with security groups. They actually work. We do pretty much the same steps. The only thing that changes a little bit is what we send in this body field. So the steps don't change, it's just this text. So if you're working with security groups, you just need to make sure you copy the right code, but the steps and everything is pretty much the same. So in this case, I'm going to copy this and just paste it here in the body. And you can see there are a couple of things that we have to change. In this case, we have the group ID, the group name, and we also have the role value. And everything else, we can leave it as it is, unless you want, for example, someone to get a SharePoint email telling them that they need access. You need to change this false from false to true, so they get an automatic email from SharePoint. I usually leave it as false, and if I want to send a notification, I prefer to send it from Power Automate. But it depends on what works best for each of the scenarios that we're working on. So the first thing is we are going to be adding the security group ID. So for that, let's add some dynamic content, and then let's use security group. And now it's going to be added, and you can see that once we do that, since there could be 1, 2, or 3, or we don't know how many access types from the access matrix, Power Automate automatically grabs our action inside for each. So for each security group, we are going to grant access to the record. So we're going to rename this to grant access to record. And something that we also need to do is to add the security group name. I forgot to add it as part of the column, so let's do that. Let's call it group name. And in this case, it's 0525 finance. And the other one is the same, but view only. I got them run again. So in this case, it's marketing, but I pasted it. And in this case, this should go here to view only, and this one should go to edit. And now we have the group name. I will just save for now and then refresh the page so it brings the new column that we just added, so we can add it here to the security group name. So once it's saved, let's refresh and we will see the new column immediately. Okay, so let's change here this to the security group name. You can see it's here. And the last thing that we need to do is to assign the role. So this will come from this column to know if it's going to be view access type or edit access type. So in this case, there's always a fixed value that we are going to use for view and edit, and those values are here. So this doesn't change between tenants. The same value that we use in my tenant is going to be used in any other tenant. So you can just copy this and just remember which one is which. This is the one for view only, and this is one for edit access. So what I'm going to do is I will copy this into a notepad, And what we need to do is pretty much make this dynamic based on the access type that we have in our SharePoint list. So let's look for access type. You can see that we have here the access type value. So what we are going to do, I'm going to copy this from the editor. And we are going to write a quick expression and just say if this value is equals to edit, then we need to assign one ID, and if not, the other ID. So this is edit access, and this is view only access. And we need to remove the extra spaces, and that's it. Let's copy this and replace it by what we have here. So let's hit on save. And now when we add a new item, it should automatically give access to this user, which is part of the marketing group and also the finance view only group. So let's create 2 items and see if the results go well. So let's add the department, hit on save, and this is going to be finance test. And then hit on save. So let's wait a couple of seconds until the trigger runs. Okay, so both of them are running. If I refresh, the access shouldn't change for my user because it's an owner. But if we open the access for this other user, we are going to see that this user got full access to the marketing record because this user is added to the marketing group, and this user got view access to the finance test. If, for example, we decide that this user doesn't need access to the finance group, we can just go and edit who are the users that can have access, and we can remove this user or add new users if someone comes into the department and needs access. So that's what makes this approach really cool, because we can make it dynamic based on the membership of the group. And what's also really good is that, for example, now that we have set up these security permissions in SharePoint, we can just go to, for example, Power Apps and create an application that is based on this list, and whatever permission that we have added to this SharePoint list will automatically also be cascaded into our SharePoint, into our application. And we're going to see that. We're going to create a quick app on this, and you're going to see that as the owner with my user, I will be able to see all the records, while the other user will be able to see only the records are related to them or that have been shared with them through the Power Automate workflow. So let's select the SharePoint site, and then the SharePoint list, which is projects. Then let's create an app and give it a minute or 2 for it to create it. And as the owner of the site, I see everything. Let's go ahead and publish this. And I didn't do anything to the application. I only created it from SharePoint. And there's no filter related to the department. There's no filter related to anything at all. You can see this is just the filter that Power Apps adds when a predefined application is created. Even if I pass the whole SharePoint list, and then if we publish it, then you can see that even if there's no filter, this user automatically gets access to whatever they have access in SharePoint. It gets cascaded into Power Apps. So, for example, if I go ahead and create a new item, you're going to see that in the department, these users are still going to see just one item and not more than that, because this is what we gave them access to. And this is how you use Power Automate to manage item security level in SharePoint, and how that can also cascade into Power Apps when you create apps on top of your SharePoint lists. I hope that this was useful for you. See you next time.